Well, TrekZone.org 10th birthday celebrations continue, firing up the satellite once again. It's only a short little hop to Perth from the Brisbane studios. Alice Krige is in Perth for the Revelation Film Festival. Alice, thanks so much for your time.
A pleasure. I'm happy to talk to trekkers or trekkies anywhere in the world. Great big family.
Trekkers or trekkies. I think that'll be the next thing I have to investigate as to exactly what we're calling ourselves these days. So obviously, Alice, you came into the franchise with First Contact. What was it like to join this massive franchise that is Star Trek and to be essentially become Captain Picard's arch enemy in that movie?
I grew up in South Africa, and television arrived in South Africa the year after I left. So I have this great black hole where cultural references should be. And I had never seen an episode of Star Trek. I'd heard of this thing of beam me up, Scotty, but I really didn't know what it meant. So that was my point of reference. And I was sent the 3 scenes of the Borg Queen by my agent to learn and go in and do an audition. And my husband and I had a friend who occasionally wrote for Star Trek, and I rushed over to his house because he had some episodes, some Borg episodes, and I watched those, and I went in to do the audition, thought I'd done a really bad job, came out, got in the car and stopped at the first payphone I could find, because of course there were no mobile phones at that point, and said to my agent, I've done a really bad audition and please call them and ask them if I can do it again. Anyway, I didn't hear from them for 3 weeks, and they called and said come in again, and I got the role, but I had no idea what I was walking into. I had no concept of this amazing extended family that is the Star Trek community. And it has been an enormous joy for me. I meet us all over the world, and there's this instant point of reference, this instant mutual interest. It's been a very, very happy experience. Making it was very happy, and the whole afterlife has been very happy too. I love going to conventions. I love seeing grown-ups in costumes speaking Klingon. I don't think we get to do stuff like that enough as adults. So I love conventions because we're all there in Borg outfits, in looking like Ferengi. I love it. I think it's brilliant.
I had a chat with Jeffrey Coombs at Oz Comic Con in Melbourne on the weekend, and he mentioned that similar sort of experiences as yourself in terms of, and he mentioned it as a gauge of how well or how his work is perceived and how loved he is by the fans, purely because of people that dress up or get into their costumes at conventions and are very excited to meet the actors at these conventions, at signings and stuff like that. Is there any? Have you ever had someone stand out to you at a convention? Someone that's stuck in your mind? Someone that you've remembered?
Oh, there have been many. I mean, many people who have made their own Borg suits and come to my table to show me. A team of scientists from NASA arrived one day wearing T-shirts saying resistance is futile, and they said whenever we hit a problem that feels insoluble, we put on these T-shirts, which was brilliant. Someone arrived at my table one day and said, may I take off my T-shirt? I'd like to show you something. And I thought, well, I'm surrounded by lots of people, so it's got to be okay. And I said, yes. And he had the Borg Queen tattooed across his chest and down the side of his body onto his back was this
Oh, wow.
image of the Borg Queen. I was speechless. I was absolutely floored. So there have been some astonishing moments, yes. But
That's incredible.
in general, it's really lovely just to talk to people, you know, whose lives aren't necessarily involved in the film industry, but who participate in a joyful, enthusiastic and wonderful way in this particular story, the Star Trek story.
Mm. Now, of course, Susanna Thompson took over as the Queen in Voyager, but then you returned for the finale Endgame, and also lent your voice to the Armada series of games. Were there any challenges of picking up the mantle that you and Susanna sort of shared as the Borg Queen between series and games?
I decided when I came on to do the finale that I actually wouldn't watch Susanna's episodes because I didn't want to kind of have an image in my head, not necessarily of anyone else doing it, but it's almost better not to have an image in your head, just to be in the moment. But I did read all the episodes, all the Borg episodes. No, the challenge for me was a couple of nights before I was due to start filming, it suddenly dawned on me. You would have thought it had dawned immediately, but it didn't. That it was the Borg Queen and 2 women, as opposed to the Borg Queen and 2 men. And I called one of the producers and I said, oh my goodness, you know, part of the energy of the Borg Queen in First Contact was a really, really very kind of sexual energy, and I'm going to be acting with 2 women. And he said, well, I tell you what, just think of her as omnisexual. And I thought, I can do that. I can do omnisexual. And that was, then I just went ahead and had a good time. They were wonderful. Both of those actresses were truly a joy and immensely generous to work with. And I was also working, of course, largely with the crew that I'd filmed First Contact with. So it was really, really lovely to be working with the same people again after a break. There was actually a 4th encounter with the Borg Queen, which was that they did an installation in Vegas at the Hilton that was the Borg Queen, the Borg taking over a spaceship, an experimental lab that was in space, and it was shot in 3D, and you went into this spaceship and were taken over by the Borg as the audience. So that was the 4th time that I actually worked with a character.
What was it like to revisit your character and expand on her a little bit more?
To keep revisiting her, it was lovely. I haven't ever worked in series television in that way. I've come in as a guest in series television with an arc of 6 or 10 or 12 episodes, both in English television and American television. So one had one arc to do, rather than going away and coming back a year or 2 years later. The only time I've ever done that has been with the Borg Queen, and I enjoyed it enormously. It was always interesting because stuff had happened, you'd lived a bit of your life, you'd had other influences, you'd had other experiences, and all of that informs how you come back. So I enjoyed it. It was entirely unexpected. You know, when I finished First Contact, I thought that was that, and that was, you know, I wouldn't encounter the Borg Queen again, but it was lovely to do so.
Now, since Trek, you have continued acting with many credits to your name since 2001, but most recently, and the reason for your visit to Australia and to Perth is the new movie that you're starring in called Jail Ceasar, and I'd love to check out the trailer first.
With me, I bring my army. Kill who you want to kill. Burn wherever you want to burn.
The gods have deserted us!
Welcome to our home.
Wow, that trailer looks incredible. Alice, what's the story behind the movie?
I not only have a very small role in it, but I was also a producer on it. And I find it to be a challenging, engrossing, illuminating, inspiring film. It's been a very long-term commitment, and the project has become more and more and more interesting the longer my relationship with it went on. It's a telling of the story of the adolescence of Julius Caesar. He was considered by his peers to be a complete waste of space, total washout, a debtor, couldn't hold down a job. He was bisexual in a very stoic and heterosexual Rome. He was totally inappropriate. No one thought he would ever amount to anything. And at the age of 33, he does his first military campaign, and in the next 12 years he becomes one of the most high-profile statesmen general of all time. Huge, towering historical figure. And Paul Schoolman, who is my husband, came upon this years ago, because until quite recently the history books didn't talk about that period in his life. Now they do. But Paul pieced together the period of his adolescence and early adulthood by reading all the authors who were writing at the time. People like Crassus and Cinna, and then subsequently Suetonius, historians who soon after Caesar wrote about him. And he pieces together this story about how this kid grows up in what is effectively a gangland landscape. It was gang warfare. They were powerful generals who had their own private armies, and they were all fighting for territory. And so we tell the story of his adolescence in a series of prisons, with largely prisoners as actors, 300 prisoners, and some astounding actors like Derek Jacobi playing Sulla, savage dictator, and it's a breathtaking performance. I think it's one of Derek's best performances on film, actually. So it's a project, it's a film that happens on many, many layers. You can take it on whatever layer accesses you. It's quite quite wonderful. And I hope everyone makes an effort to go on to, I tell you what, this is a call for all Trekkies, to go on to IMDb, the International Movie Database, and go to the Jail Ceasar site and just post a request saying, we want to see this movie. Because believe it or not, we, the viewers, actually can influence the outcome of a movie's life. We've been told by the sales agent who's picked up Jail Ceasar that likes, if you go onto IMDb and review a movie and give it, for example, 7 stars, buyers of other territories are more likely to pick it up. You can actually let buyers who live in a very kind of isolated environment, all they meet are other buyers. They go around festivals and markets just talking to film buyers. Then I really don't think they're in touch with what people on the street want to see. And the fact that most of us have a really varied diet in terms of the kind of film and television we want to watch. We don't want to watch just big tentpole movies. We want to watch kind of everything that's out there, that's interesting.
Something that makes us think.
So go onto IMDb and just put up a post saying, we want to see this movie, bring it to Australia.
Absolutely. Well, that's the call out for all the Trekkies out there. The Queen has requested that, so jump onto trekszone.org. I'll put the links up on the website and follow them through, and let's bring Jail Ceasar to Australia. But Alice, where did the idea come from to film inside prisons?
Well, Paul had wanted to find a way of telling this story on film that was not about togas and, you know, the Colosseum. And he just woke up one morning in the way that creative people like him do. And he thought, you know, Caesar was perceived as being absolutely at the bottom of the bin, that he'd never amount to anything, that he couldn't, just as I said, a total degenerate, to wash out, a useless person. But he was animated by dreams and ambitions, and inside him was the dream of Julius Caesar. And Paul suddenly woke up and thought one morning, popped into his head, if anyone would truly understand what Caesar felt like, it would be people who were in prison. Because mostly, unless you've had to do with people who are incarcerated, who, for the most part, are people like us, who've not been incarcerated, spent a lot of time in prison, but that was voluntary, who've made a mistake, who've made some errors of judgment. But that doesn't mean they're not full of hopes for the future, full of dreams and ambitions, but they're generally perceived by society at large as being failures and sort of on the edges of society.
They're almost
and that's how
in a way.
Caesar was perceived. And so I think Paul just felt that if we shot it inside a prison, there would be this huge empathy for Caesar's journey, this absolutely direct understanding of Caesar's journey, and no one would be acting. It would be part of their lives, part of their experience. And he just wanted to access that raw, honest connection, and that is what is in the film. It is absolutely immediate. The prisoners do astonishing work, and it's true and real and raw and very compelling to watch. It's not in the least bit voyeuristic, because it's not about prisoners in prison. It's about this kid, Julius Caesar. But the milieu in which that story is told has a directness and a realness that is astonishing.
What were the inmates like to work with, to control them and obviously get the shots needed to make the film? What were they like to work with?
Everyone that came to the project in 3 different prisons in 3 different countries. We filmed in Cardiff Prison in Wales and in Alberta in Drumheller Penitentiary, and the bulk of the film is shot in Pollsmoor Prison in Cape Town in South Africa, where Nelson Mandela spent some time. Every prisoner that came to the project came on a voluntary basis. No one was compelled to come. They came because they wanted to, and they stayed because they wanted to. And everyone had a spark and something special to offer. All human beings have something special to offer, but sometimes we need to be given the circumstances in which that can flower or take shape. And very often, I think people who wind up making choices that end them up in prison haven't necessarily had a chance to develop their particular ability, their particular potential. And somehow or other, the work that we were doing, although we didn't go in as social workers, that's what happened. So everyone came forward with 100% commitment, with complete candor, and just gave of themselves, so that the group became really self-protecting and self-policing, as it were. Everyone was committed to the work, and everyone was really committed to it reaching completion and getting out into the world. So there was like 100% focus, and it was very, very inspiring. And for me as an actor, it was an object lesson in acting, because the prisoners that we worked with, male and female, worked without any concept of performing. They just were in the moment. And that's what you need to do as an actor. But it's very easy to lose sight of that, because you learn how to make things effective, you learn shortcuts, you learn tricks, you learn what works. And the moment you get stuck in that space, you start to lose truthfulness and being in the momentness and authenticity. So they were a real lesson for me as an actor.
The movie has won some awards at other film festivals. What's the audience reaction been like, those that have seen it?
The audience reaction so far? Some people find it more than they can cope with. I guess it's just quite disturbing. You do go into the heart of incarceration, not in a negative way, but it's in your face. But for the most part, audiences, for example, at the screening on Sunday in Perth, it was a fairly typical response that at the Q&A afterwards, Paul and I came down to the front of the theatre, and there was a very prolonged silence. And you sit in the silence and you're waiting for someone to ask a question, and you're wondering, why is no one saying anything? And always what the reason is that the film happens on so many layers that you're still busy processing it and putting it together and making all the connections, because it's a very resonant piece of work. There's a moment in the film that always astonishes me. Crassus, who's a Roman character, and who basically funded Caesar's political career. He was funding a number of political careers, And Caesar very cleverly plays him off against Cicero. Caesar becomes a master manipulator. And there's a moment, and Caesar has spent millions of Crassus's money, and he hasn't quite produced the results that Crassus want. And there's a moment where Crassus says to Caesar, I don't want to give it away, but there is an astonishing moment. And every time I see that moment, I think to myself, oh my goodness, that is Obama and the lobbies, Obama and corporate money. So for me, the film has the most unexpected resonances, and I think that's what keeps audiences talking about it. We came out of the Q&A and we walked into the bar of the cinema and we were still talking about it in a group, 40 minutes, an hour later. And people generally go on and on thinking about it for days. We've had emails from people saying, I'm still thinking about it. I'm still waking up with those images in my head. So that's my experience of the response. People are either totally overwhelmed by it or are so engaged that they start off not being able to speak about it, and then it's like a torrent.
Well, Alice, it really does sound very interesting, and I can't wait to see it. But as you said, you've got to jump. The shout out to the Trekkies out there to jump onto IMDb and give it a good rating and get it into Australia and get it distributed around the world as well. Not obviously not
Wonderful.
just to Australia. But Alice, thank you. All the links there will be on trekzone.org. Follow through to the 10th birthday coverage. But Alice, thank you so much for sitting down and having a chat with me.
My great pleasure. Thanks for asking me.